The galaxy had always been a place of chaos and war, with species fighting for power and control over planets and resources. Alex, a human soldier, had seen his fair share of destruction. He was stationed on a peacekeeping mission to monitor a region of space that had been torn apart by years of conflict. However, his mission was about to take a sudden turn, and he would soon find himself in the middle of something far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The planet Alex was on was in the midst of a civil war. The skies above were filled with the smoke of countless battles, and the ground below was littered with wreckage from ships that had been shot down. It was a world torn apart, a world that had lost all hope. As Alex moved through the ruins of what had once been a thriving city, he saw the signs of the devastation everywhere: burnt buildings, abandoned homes, and the distant sound of explosions. Alex was a soldier, trained for situations like this. His job was to keep the peace, to ensure that no one took advantage of the chaos. He had no particular love for war, but it was his duty. He had been trained to survive in places like this. But as he walked through the shattered streets, something caught his eye: a faint movement. It was barely noticeable, but Alex's instincts kicked in. He crouched low and moved closer to the source of the movement. As he approached, he saw a figure lying in the dirt. It was an alien, a woman, with skin that shimmered in the dim light, and her features were both delicate and fierce. She was struggling, her face twisted in pain as she tried to push herself up. Blood stained the ground around her, and Alex could see that she had been through a great deal. Alex hesitated for a moment. He had never been trained to rescue people, especially not from the enemy. His mission was clear: observe, report, and avoid involvement. But something about the situation felt different. She was alone, helpless, and no one else seemed to be around. Alex couldn't ignore her. He knelt down beside her and gently lifted her, trying to be as careful as possible despite the chaos around them. The woman let out a sharp gasp as he moved her, but she didn't resist. She was weak, and Alex could see that she had been tortured. Her eyes were filled with fear, but there was also a hint of gratitude. As he carried her to safety, she whispered something in a language Alex didn't understand. He didn't know if it was a plea for help or a thank you, but he knew he couldn't leave her behind. Alex moved quickly through the wreckage, his senses alert to any danger. The enemy might still be nearby, and he needed to find shelter. Eventually, he reached a small abandoned building that had been mostly untouched by the fighting. It was a perfect place to hide, at least for a short while. He gently laid the woman down on the floor and took a moment to catch his breath. The woman's breathing was shallow, and Alex could see that she was struggling to stay conscious. She needed medical attention, and fast. But Alex didn't have the supplies to treat her injuries. He couldn't risk taking her to the nearby military outpost. He wasn't supposed to be involved in any rescue missions. As he sat next to her, he noticed that she was still looking at him, her eyes filled with a mix of confusion and gratitude. He knew she must be wondering who he was, what he was doing here. He was a soldier, but he wasn't her enemy. He hadn't come to fight her people. He'd come to do his job, to observe. But as the hours passed, something started to change. This woman seemed to trust him more and more. She was no longer frightened, and though she could barely speak, Alex could tell she was trying to communicate. She reached out and touched his arm, her fingers cold but firm. He gave her a small smile, though he wasn't sure she could understand him. "I won't leave you," he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand him. "We'll get through." The woman's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, Alex thought he saw a glimmer of recognition. She seemed to calm down, and that was enough for Alex to know that he had made the right choice in helping her. It wasn't long before she fell into a deep sleep. Alex kept watch. His mind raced as he thought about what to do next. He wasn't sure where to go from here. He had rescued her, but now what? He had no clear orders, no backup, and no way to contact anyone for help. The planet was in turmoil, and the enemy would be searching for survivors as the night wore on. Alex kept a watchful eye on the woman, who was now resting peacefully. He couldn't help but wonder who she was and why she had been targeted. She wasn't just any alien, there was something about her, something that set her apart from the others he had encountered. Her appearance was regal, her features elegant but fierce. It was clear she wasn't just another civilian caught in the crossfire. The question that lingered in his mind was whether he had just rescued someone important, someone who could change the course of the war, or someone who was simply another victim of a conflict that had consumed too many innocent lives before he could think too much about it. The woman stirred, her eyes flicking open. She looked at him, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was a silent understanding between them. She knew he had saved her, and he knew he had just made a choice that would change his life forever. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Alex smiled. "You're safe now." But deep down, he knew that the danger wasn't over. The journey ahead would be even more difficult, and they were far from being out of harm's way. But for now, at least they had each other, and that was enough. The days passed in silence, but there was something between Alex and Lyra that neither of them could ignore. They were stranded together on this broken, war-torn world. Alex, a soldier, had seen countless battles, but he never imagined he would be here, caring for a wounded alien princess. Lyra, the woman he had rescued, was still weak, but alive, and her presence had become something Alex couldn't quite understand. Lyra's people were known throughout the galaxy for their power and their vast empire. She was not just any survivor. She was the daughter of a royal family, an heir to a throne that might not even exist anymore. Alex had no idea who she truly was, but that didn't matter. She was hurt, and he had made a promise to help her survive. For the first few days, there was little conversation between them. Alex focused on keeping her safe, bringing her food and water. He tried to avoid asking too many questions, knowing that Lyra might not be ready to share her past. But slowly, she started to open up. One evening, as the two of them sat in the corner of their hideout, Alex noticed that Lyra was staring out at the night sky. The stars were distant and cold, much like the world around them. She looked fragile, but her eyes were sharp, her mind always working. "Where do you think we'll go?" Alex asked quietly, breaking the silence. Lyra turned to him, her face softening. She had always been composed, even in the most dangerous situations, but there was a sadness in her eyes now. "I don't know, my people are gone," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The empire I came from is no more." Alex could see the weight of her words. Lyra wasn't just another refugee. She was the last of her kind, a survivor of a people who had been wiped out by the war. Alex didn't know what to say. He was a soldier, used to fighting battles, not comforting someone who had lost everything. But he felt a need to help her, to give her something to hold on to in this dark time. "Then what will you do?" Alex asked, his voice gentle. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to fall. "I was trained to be a diplomat," she said, her voice steady. "To negotiate peace. Right now it seems that there's nothing left to save. My people are gone, my world destroyed, and there's no one left to help." Alex felt a knot form in his stomach. He had never seen someone so broken. Lyra, a woman who had once commanded respect and power, was now just a survivor, clinging to the hope that there was something left worth saving. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt heavy, but Alex didn't want to push her further. He could see how much it hurt her to speak about her past, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to hear more. Instead, he sat with her, offering the quiet support he knew she needed. Over the next few days, the bond between them grew stronger. Lyra began to share more about her life, her people, and her responsibilities. She told Alex about the diplomatic missions she had been a part of, the treaties she had helped negotiate, and the way her people had been united under one rule. "Never thought it would end like this," Lyra said one evening, as they sat by a small fire. The flickering flames cast shadows on her face, making her look even more distant. "I thought I would bring peace to the galaxy, not watch it burn." Alex could hear the pain in her words, and it made him feel guilty. He hadn't done anything to stop the war. He was just one soldier in a galaxy filled with conflict. But something about Lyra's story made him want to do more. He didn't want her to lose hope. "I don't know if you can change the galaxy," Alex said softly, "but you've changed my life. I don't know where we're going, but I'll help you get there."
Together.
Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a long moment, they didn't speak. But then she gave him a small smile, one that seemed to lighten the weight on her shoulders. "Thank you, Alex," she said quietly. I don't know if I can ever repay you for what you've done. You saved me when no one else would." Alex shook his head. "I didn't do it for anything in return. I couldn't leave you behind." Lyra nodded, her expression softening. It wasn't the same look she had given him when they first met, one filled with fear and suspicion. Now there was something else, something warmer. She was starting to trust him. As the days passed, they began to rely on each other. Alex taught Lyra how to use basic human survival tactics, how to make a shelter, how to find food, and how to stay hidden. Lyra, in turn, shared her knowledge of diplomacy and negotiation. She showed him how to read people's emotions, how to understand their needs, and how to speak to them in a way that would make them listen. Even though their skills were different, they complemented each other perfectly. Lyra's intelligence and experience helped Alex navigate their difficult situation, while Alex's strength and determination kept them both safe. One evening, as they sat together, looking out over the destroyed landscape, Lyra turned to Alex and said, "I don't know what's ahead, but I know I'm not alone anymore." Alex met her gaze. "You never were," he said. "We're in this together." Lyra smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Alex felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep them moving forward. Together, they would face whatever came next. And in that moment, Alex realized that the rescue he had carried out was more than just saving a life. It was the beginning of something much greater. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were building something new, something stronger. As the days turned into weeks, Alex and Lyra grew closer. They had come to rely on each other not just for survival, but for companionship. Despite their differences, they had found a sense of understanding between them. This was a journey unlike any he had ever experienced. He had always been a soldier trained to fight, to protect, and to survive. But now he was becoming something more. He was a protector, a confidant, and a friend. Lyra, on the other hand, was still the alien princess she had been before. She carried with her the weight of her people, their hopes, and their failures. But the more she spent time with Alex, the more she realized how much of her life had been about others, about her people, her family, and her role in the galaxy. For the first time, she was beginning to understand what it meant to truly live for herself. One day, as they sat in their small hideout, Lyra looked out at the stars. They had been hiding for so long that the thought of returning to the galaxy's politics seemed almost impossible. She had lost everything: her family, her planet, her people, and now the future seemed uncertain. Still, she couldn't ignore the call to go back, to try once again to rebuild what had been broken. "We can't keep hiding here forever," Lyra said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. She was speaking more to herself than to Alex, but he heard her nonetheless. Alex turned to her, his face softening. "I know you want to go back to your people. You're a leader, Lyra. You have a responsibility to them." Lyra sighed, her shoulders slumping. "But what if they've moved on? What if they no longer care? I can't just show up and expect everything to be the way it was." Alex was silent for a moment. He had seen the pain in her eyes, the doubt that clouded her once. Strong resolve. He wanted to help, to make her see that she still had something to fight for. But he also knew that she had to come to that realization on her own. "I think you should go back," Alex said finally. "Not because of your people, but because you need to know what's left. You need to know if there's a future for you there. And if there is, then maybe we can rebuild together." Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She had always been so sure of herself, so confident in her role as a diplomat, but now she was unsure. Could she really go back and face what had happened? Could she reclaim her place among her people, or was it too late? "You really think it's possible?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Alex smiled softly. I think anything is possible. You've already proven that. The next morning, Lyra made her decision. She would go back, but not as the princess who had fled in fear. She would return as the diplomat, the leader, the woman who could bring peace to her people once again. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She was ready to face whatever challenges awaited her. They left their hideout, traveling across the galaxy. To Lyra's homeworld, yes, they entered the system. The vastness of space seemed to close in around them. The planet was beautiful, its oceans and mountains a reminder of what had once been. But now it was a shadow of its former self, scarred by the war that had ravaged it. When they arrived at the capital city, Lyra's heart sank. It was a city that had once been full of life, bustling with activity. It was eerily quiet, its streets empty, its buildings damaged. The people of the planet had been scattered, their homes destroyed, and Lyra wondered if anyone still remembered the promise of peace that she had once fought for as they entered the palace. The sight of the familiar walls brought back memories of a time when things had been simpler, when she had been a princess with a future. Now that future seemed uncertain. She could feel the weight of her family's legacy on her shoulders, and the pressure of her people's expectations was overwhelming. Inside the Grand Hall, Lyra was greeted by her advisors, most of whom had been loyal to her family. They were happy to see her alive, but there was also a sense of fear in their eyes. They had heard rumors about the fall of the Empire, about the betrayal that had caused so much damage. No one knew who was still loyal to her, and the landscape had changed drastically in her absence. Lyra, one of her advisors, Orcs, said with a solemn bow, "We feared you were lost forever. The galaxy has moved on without us. But there is still hope. You are the last of your line. You have the power to restore order." Lyra looked at him, her eyes cold and calculating. "Order? How can I restore order when everything has fallen apart?" Drek hesitated. "You must unite what remains. The factions are divided, but they still listen to you. You have the respect of the people. If you can convince them, you may be able to bring peace back to this planet." Lyra turned away, her mind racing. She knew that bringing peace wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that it was her responsibility. She had spent years preparing for this moment, training to be a diplomat, a leader. But now, as she stood in the palace she had once called home, she realized that the greatest challenge was not in the negotiations, but in finding the strength to move forward. "I don't know if I can do this alone," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with doubt. Alex, who had been standing quietly by her side, stepped forward. "You're not alone," he said firmly. "I'm with you. We'll face this together." Lyra looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and confusion in her eyes. She had never imagined that a human soldier would be the one standing beside her, offering support when no one else could. For the first time in weeks, Lyra felt something stirring inside her hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild the galaxy they had lost. Together. The days that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. Lyra, despite her doubts, was determined to regain control of her people. She knew that she couldn't do it alone, but the weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her every moment. She spent long hours meeting with her advisors, trying to understand the fractured political landscape of her homeworld. There were many factions, each one vying for control, and none of them were willing to back down. Alex remained by her side, offering his support. He wasn't a diplomat, but his calm demeanor and sharp instincts helped keep Lyra focused. They spent their evenings together, talking through strategies, trying to come up with a plan. Lyra knew that she couldn't restore peace with words alone. Action would be needed. And soon, one evening, as Lyra and Alex walked through the palace gardens, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She had felt it for Dazan. Unease that gnawed at her every time she met with her advisors or moved through the halls of the palace. There was a sense of betrayal in the air, feeling that someone was working against her. "I don't trust them," Lyra said quietly, her voice tense. "The advisors, the council, they don't want peace. They want power." Alex glanced at her, concern in his eyes. "Are you sure?" Lyra nodded. "They've been playing games. They act like they're on my side, but I know they're not. They want to use me to get what they want, and once they have it, they'll throw me aside. Alex's expression darkened. He had seen enough in his time as a soldier to know when someone was being deceived. Then we need to move fast. If they're planning something, we can't let them catch us off guard. Lyra's gaze hardened. She had always been a diplomat, trained to navigate the complexities of politics, but this was different. This was survival. Her life and Alex's was at risk. They couldn't afford to wait for the inevitable betrayal to come. The next morning, as Lyra prepared for a meeting with her council, a messenger arrived at the palace gates. His face was pale, and his eyes were wide with fear. "Princess Lyra," he said, gasping for breath, "there's trouble. The rebellion is here. They're coming for you." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had known this moment was coming. But hearing it out loud was different. The rebellion had been gaining momentum for months, but she hadn't expected them to move so quickly. And yet the message was clear. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for action had arrived. Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to leave, now." Alex didn't hesitate. He had known this was a possibility, and he was ready. He grabbed his weapons, checking them quickly to make sure they were in good condition. Lyra, though she had never been trained for combat, was already preparing herself. She wasn't going to be a victim again, not this time. They rushed through the palace, gathering what supplies they could. The palace guards had been loyal to her family, but loyalty was a fragile thing in times of war. Lyra knew that some of them might be sympathetic to her cause. Others would turn on her in an instant if it meant protecting their own positions as they made their way to the palaces. Secret escape tunnels? Lyra couldn't help but feel a deep sense of loss. This had once been her home, the place where she had learned to lead, to fight for her people. And now it was a place of danger and betrayal. She was leaving behind everything she had ever known, with no guarantee that she would ever return. "Keep moving," Alex urged, his voice firm as he led the way through the tunnels. "We don't have much time." They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing through the narrow passages. Lyra could hear the sounds of chaos above them, the muffled voices of guards, the distant sounds of explosions, and the clatter of weapons. Being readied, rebellion had arrived, and there was no turning back now. They emerged from the tunnels into the outskirts of the city, where Alex's ship was hidden. It was a small, unassuming craft, but it was fast and equipped for a quick getaway. The moment they reached the ship, Alex began the launch sequence. Preparing to leave the planet, "Lyra, you need to get into the cockpit," Alex said, his voice urgent. "I'll handle the rest." Lyra hesitated, a moment of doubt creeping into her mind. She had never flown a ship like this, but there was no time to waste. She knew that if they didn't leave now, they would be caught. She quickly climbed into the cockpit and strapped herself in, her hands shaking as she gripped the controls. "Ready?" Alex called from the back of the ship. Lyra nodded, though she wasn't sure she could do this. "Let's go." With a deep breath, she powered up the ship's engines and lifted off, her heart pounding in her chest. The ship soared into the sky, leaving the burning city behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, Lyra glanced back one last time, watching as the smoke from the rebellion rose into the sky. Alex sat beside her, his expression calm. "We're not out of danger yet," he said. "But we've got a chance. We've got each other." Lyra turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She had lost everything, but in Alex, she had found something she hadn't realized she needed: a partner, someone who would fight beside her no matter what. "Thank you, Alex," she said quietly. "For everything?" He smiled, though there was a trace of sadness in his eyes. "No need to thank me. We're in this together." As the ship soared through the stars, Lyra knew that their journey was far from over. The rebellion was still out there, and so were the many factions that wanted to control her world. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of hope. With Alex by her side, she was ready to face whatever challenges came next. The journey through the stars had been long, but for Lyra and Alex, it had also been a time of reflection. After escaping her homeworld, they had taken to the edges of known space, hiding in a quiet sector where they could rest and regroup. Even as the silence of space surrounded them, Lyra's mind was far from peaceful. She couldn't shake the feeling that the greatest danger they had faced was still ahead. Alex had been a constant presence by her side, calm, steady, and always ready to protect her. He was a soldier, a man of action, and in many ways he had become the anchor she needed. But deep down, Lyra knew that her battle was not just for survival, it was a battle for the future of her people. And for the first time, she was beginning to wonder if there was anyone left to fight for. As they traveled further into the unknown, Lyra spent her days going through the records she had brought with her. They contained information about her family, her people, and the political alliances that had once held the galaxy together. But as she pored over the documents, something stood out. Hidden among the pages was a small, cryptic note, a message from her father. It was brief, written in the same elegant script that she had seen 1,000 times. But there was something in the message that made Lyra's heart skip. It was not a message of love or advice as she had expected. Instead, it was a warning about betrayal from within her own ranks. Her father had known that someone in his inner circle was working against him. The message was clear. There was a traitor among them, someone who had played a role in the downfall of her people. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the weight of the realization hit her. She wasn't just running from the rebellion. She was running from someone she had trusted. Alex, Lyra said, her voice shaking slightly. She turned to him, holding the note in her hand. I think I've found something. Alex turned from the cockpit, where he had been keeping an eye on their surroundings. What is it? Lyra handed him the note, watching as his eyes scanned the words. His expression darkened as he finished reading. This is bad, Alex said quietly, handing the note back to her. A traitor in your family? That changes everything. Lyra nodded, her mind racing. She had known that the galaxy was full of enemies, but this was something different. People she had once trusted, the advisors who had guided her, might have been working against her all along. Her father had left this message for her because he knew the truth, that the greatest threat to her survival was not the rebellion or the war. It was the people closest to her. We need to find out who it is, Lyra said, her voice firm. If we can't trust anyone, then we'll have to trust ourselves. Alex nodded. We can't keep running forever. If there's a traitor, we need to deal with them before they do any more damage, Lyra agreed. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. The galaxy was changing, and if they wanted to survive, they needed to act. But where could they go? Who could they trust? The rebels were still out there, and if they knew what had happened to Lyra, they would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. But there was one place they could go, the one place where Lyra might still have allies. We're going. To have to go to the heart of it all? Lyra said, her eyes steely with determination. To the Council of the Stars? They're the only ones who can help us now. The Council of the Stars was an ancient governing body, made up of representatives from the most powerful factions in the galaxy. They were the last hope for restoring order, but after the war, their influence had waned. If Lyra could convince the Council that she was still the rightful heir, that she still had the ability to lead, she might be able to unite the galaxy once more. But it wouldn't be easy. The Council was filled with political maneuvering, betrayal, and greed. And with a traitor in her midst, it was only a matter of time before they would turn on her. 2, we'll need a plan, Alex said, his voice thoughtful. And we'll need allies. You can't do this alone, Lyra. Lyra looked out the window at the stars, her mind racing. I don't want to do this alone, but I don't know who we can trust anymore. Everyone has their own agenda. Alex stood by her side, his expression hardening. Then we make our own agenda. We fight for what's right. Lyra turned to him, gratitude in her eyes. I never imagined I'd have someone like you by my side. Alex gave her a small, reassuring smile. You're not alone. We'll figure this out together. They spent the next few days preparing. Lyra sent out discreet messages, trying to contact any allies who might still be loyal to her family. But as the days passed, it became clear that the galaxy was a much darker place than she had remembered. Allies were few, and the number of people willing to stand against the traitor in her midst was even fewer. Despite the growing uncertainty, Lyra remained determined. she couldn't give up. Not now. Too much was at stake. The future of her people, the future of the galaxy, it all rested on her shoulders. One evening, as they made their way to the edge of council space, Lyra received a message. It was encrypted, but she recognized the code. It was from an old friend, Xander, a former military commander who had fought alongside her father. If there was anyone who could help her now, it was Xander. "We've got one chance," Lyra said, looking at Alex. "Xander's offering us an alliance. If we can get to him before anyone else, he'll help us." Alex nodded. "Let's go." Then, time's running out. As they set course for Xander's location, Lyra felt a new sense of hope stir within her. The road ahead was uncertain, and the danger was greater than ever. But she was no longer running from her past. She was facing it head-on, ready to fight for a future that was still hers to claim. The stars passed by in a blur as Lyra and Alex made their way toward Xander's location. The message she had received was brief, but it gave her hope. Xander, a former military commander, was one of the few people Lyra could still trust. He had fought alongside her father in the wars of the past and had always been loyal to her family. If anyone could help her rebuild what had been lost, it was Xander. But time was not on their side. As they neared the coordinates, Lyra couldn't help but feel a growing sense of urgency. The galaxy was in chaos, and her people were scattered. The rebellion was still a threat. But now she knew there was something even more dangerous, a traitor among her closest allies. This betrayal ran deep, and it was clear that those she had trusted most were part of the reason for her downfall. "You think Xander will really help us?" Alex asked, his voice low as he monitored the ship's systems. "I don't know," Lyra replied, her fingers tightening around the controls. "But I have to believe he will. He's the last person I can turn to." The ship's engines hummed. As they entered a small, quiet system far from the chaos that had engulfed the galaxy, it was a place that had been forgotten by most, a safe haven for those who needed to stay out of sight. The coordinates led them to a hidden planet where Xander had established a base of operations. As the ship descended toward the planet, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. It was small, but it was enough to keep her moving forward. They had made it this far, and now it was up to Xander to decide their fate. When they landed, the atmosphere was tense. The planet was barren, with rocky terrain and few signs of life. Xander's base was hidden within the cliffs, a series of underground bunkers and tunnels that only a few knew about. As Lyra and Alex approached the entrance, a group of armed soldiers emerged from the shadows, their weapons trained on the ship. "Stay calm," Alex whispered, his hand resting on the handle of his own weapon. Lyra nodded, but her heart was pounding. She had been here before years ago, when the galaxy was still at peace. But now, everything had changed. She was no longer the princess she once was. She was a survivor, and she had no idea what to expect from Xander. One of the soldiers stepped forward, lowering his weapon slightly. "You're Lyra," he said. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of respect in it. "Xander's expecting you." With a nod, Lyra followed the soldier into the base. The interior was dimly lit, with walls lined with monitors and maps. It was a military base, built for secrecy and defense, and it had the feel of a place that had been abandoned by time. But despite its worn appearance, there was an undeniable strength to it. This was a place that had survived the worst. Lyra hoped it would be the key to her future. They reached a large, open room where Xander stood waiting. He was taller than Lyra remembered, his once black hair now streaked with gray, and his face was weathered by years of war. There was still the same fire in his eyes, the same loyalty that had driven him to fight for her father and for the galaxy. "Lyra," Xander said, his voice deep and gravelly. He stepped forward and embraced her briefly. "I didn't think I'd see you again." Lyra stepped back, searching his face for signs of betrayal or falsehood. But all she saw was the man who had once been a trusted ally. "I didn't expect to be here either," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Things have changed. The galaxy is falling apart, and I need your help." Xander's eyes narrowed, and he motioned for them to sit. "I know, I've heard the rumors about your people, about the betrayal. But I don't know if I can offer you what you're asking." The galaxy isn't the same place it was. I don't care about the galaxy anymore, Lyra said, her voice firm. I care about saving what's left of my people. There's a traitor in my inner circle. Someone who's been working against me from the very beginning. If we don't stop them, everything will be lost. Xander was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. Who is it? He asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. I don't know yet, Lyra admitted. But I will find out. I need you to help me get to the Council of the Stars. They're the only ones who can make a difference now. I don't trust anyone else. I need your resources, Xander. Xander looked away, deep in thought. The Council? Said his tone. Wary, they've been useless. They've been sitting on their hands while the galaxy burns. But I understand. You want to rebuild your people, to unite what's left. But you're asking for a lot. Lyra leaned forward, her voice full of resolve. I'm not asking for your loyalty, Xander. I'm asking for your help. If you want to see you. The galaxies survive. If you want to see your people survive, then you need to help me stop the people who are trying to destroy everything. Xander studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. All right, Lyra, we'll do it your way. But no, it won't be easy. We'll have enemies everywhere, and we won't be able to trust anyone. But if you're willing to risk it all, then so am I. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had gotten what she needed, an ally, someone who would fight by her side. Thank you, Xander. We won't regret this. As they made their plans to move forward, Lyra knew that the road ahead would be difficult. But with Alex by her side, and now with Xander's help, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. The future of the galaxy was still uncertain, but for the first time in a while, she believed they had a chance to change things. The battle for the galaxy had only just begun, but Lyra was ready. She was no longer running from the past. She was facing it head-on, ready to fight for a future that was still hers to claim.